Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Why does the black media matter? Why even have a black media? I said 17 years ago that all media, is defined by who owns it, who controls it, but most importantly, whose interest it operates in. Bob Johnson created BET, but white people funded it, so that meant that they controlled it, and as a result, it operated in their interest. It certainly didn't operate in ours. A lot of black folks weren't willing to admit to that about BET when it began. The boomers had all kinds of delusions. But in the years to come, the Gen Xers, Millennials, and now Gen Z, they look at BET as a joke. The ridicule and the insults about BET took hold as soon as the Gen Xers hit their teenage years, started calling it EBT instead of BET. It was obvious what it is. The point that media serves is to promote a particular worldview. Up until the last 15 years or so, ours was totally dominated by what our enemies put over the airwaves or in print. That has finally begun to change, modestly, but to be sure, it's changing. But then again, an avalanche doesn't begin with half the mountain falling away immediately. It starts with a few pebbles at first, and things seem to stabilize, at least on the surface. But most people don't recognize that there's huge changes happening underneath the surface, and then next thing you know, half the mountain begins to move slowly at first, and then eventually it all breaks away and can't be stopped. This is the change that I think has begun, and I want to thank you for allowing me to have been a part of it. And make no mistake, that's how it works. I didn't elbow my way in. You allowed this to happen. You're the reason that it occurred because you wanted it. And as the voice that's been coming out of your computer or your TV or your telephone for the last 15 years, I can tell you, I certainly wouldn't be here if you didn't want it. I couldn't exist without you, that's for sure. That's the reason why ever since I started doing the Moment of Truth, I made it a point that with every single video I posted, I would always end it by saying, Black empowerment only exists because of you. I didn't say just the black media. I said black empowerment. Every one of you should see yourselves as the resistance in a war against the greatest evil the world has ever faced, white supremacy. And you are soldiers for the greatest cause mankind has ever had, black empowerment. But the war that we're fighting is not merely to stop the unrelenting anti-black violence that we're subjected to. It is to make sure that we have our piece of the world and that we control it. A man once said that after a revolution, it's not the ideas that carry over, it's the institutions. Now, Professor Black Truth's definition of an institution is a group of people who come together to protect and promote a particular idea or ideal. Banks can be an institution. They come together to promote commerce. Schools can be an institution. They come together to promote indoctrination, education, allegedly. Certainly in the black community, the church is an institution. Though to be honest, the church's prominence in our community happens to be largely artificial because it's the one institution that white power allowed us to have that they didn't put under constant attack. And when you look at how these pulpit pimps behave, you understand why that is. They come together so the pastor can get a new Bentley on the congregation's dime and then brag that God bought it for him. With the black media, we're not so much attempting to put in place a new institution as we are to reinforce and, truth be told, resurrect an old one. One that's free from the poisonous influence of white supremacy, that speaks unapologetically in our favor and ours alone. One that seeks the empowerment of our people and not white advertiser dollars. When groups and societies go through calamities and upheavals, what happens is that their institutions come under immense pressure, and when those old institutions fall, new ones arise. This is not to say that every single one of our institutions has been tools of the devil, far from it, but they have all, to some extent or another, been contaminated by the influence of white power and its agents. In many cases, a lot of them have been outright compromised. The reason we've been running in circles for so many decades is because we refused to accept that reality, so we kept going on as if everything was normal when it wasn't. We've never had a moment when our institutions were not under constant assault because we are a people under siege. Our institutions may be weak, but not because they're bad or wrong, but because they're under constant attack, both from without and from within. But even in their weakness, our institutions are still standing when all others would have been reduced to dust by now. Our institutions have been weakened, but not destroyed. And truth be told, a lot of them are worth preserving, if we get back to demanding that they operate in our interests. It's been said that the definition of power is when you can define yourself and your relationship to those around you in such a way that your definition becomes theirs. Now, when you look at the things and institutions that black people have been getting dewy-eyed about for over a century, you realize these have actually been institutions that the white media has conditioned us to cherish. The black church actually began on the slave plantations. You would have Massa's favorite house Negro delivering the Sunday sermon, and he would be telling the rest of the slaves to obey their massa, as the good book says. You know, Nat Turner used to be like that. He preached the Bible for Massa, that is, until he bothered to read the rest of those pages and he decided vengeance is mine. But when you look at the corrupt and crumbling individuals that white power has put into our institutions, you see that they either need to be abandoned or they need to be repurposed by force. White power set them up to perpetuate the interests of white supremacy, but the pressure from the grassroots has shaken these old decrepit fossils up. And when I talk about that grassroots, that means you. And the same goes for these so-called civil rights organizations. They were almost all inventions of or heavily guided by white power for the same purpose: to have controlled opposition amongst the only people who could bring white supremacy down. New Black Media Appreciation Month has begun, and we embrace the truth. This is a time that we've set aside to make it a point to reinforce and salute the people who are the thought leaders of the B1. That's you. When we say things like the code is the leader, what that means is we all understand what's in our interest, so we don't need nor are we waiting for any one individual to come along and tell us what to do. The ones who deserve the real credit is not myself nor any other member of the New Voices of Black Media. The ones who deserve the credit, the ones who have earned it, as always, is you. You're the reason reparations is a political issue now. You're the reason the clowns and the old dead black media are mad as hell because you shoved them aside. How long have I told you that yours are the eyeballs and the ears that they've been fighting to control? Sure, at the individual level it may be hard to see that, but that's why the black media is here, to show you you're not alone. This is what happens at the group level. You are the reason that our talking points and lexicon have become household words now. You're the ones who have enabled us to start taking scalps, figuratively speaking, and start putting boots to behinds. Without you, all of us, would be like those Kundalini clowns from way back in the day. A bunch of folks talking but nobody listening. And do not underestimate that. When I made my now classic video warning about the deadly deception of Kamala Harris back in 2017, I was sending that up as a signal flare to you. You were the ones I wanted to see it, and you were the ones who took it and ran with it. Take a bow. You earned it. I'm not the muscle behind the message, and neither are any of the other voices or faces that you may listen to and look at. The muscle is and has always been you. Because I don't know if I've made any lasting contributions to this fight, truth be told. I guess that's why I've tried to take the lessons that I learned from our Grandmaster teachers and, in my admittedly own imperfect way, take what I feel to be the next step. I hope, that I've helped to contribute to a proper lexicon to discuss our interests. Starting with We're All Detroiters Now, I talked about how for decades we've been using the wrong words to talk about our issues. We spent decades demanding jobs when we should have been demanding businesses, something that we control. One word makes all the difference. I also made it a point to create a number of phrases and talking points to help my people express what they really mean. I created the phrase, when white supremacy is done with its tools, it breaks its tools. Now, I don't bring that up for bragging rights. I could care less about that. If I did, then I'd be running around telling everybody pay me some royalties. I care about the words being put out there and the message underneath. But I also have to point out who came up with that phrase because I don't want it to ever be misused. If I can take credit for anything, I think I can take credit for that phrase. But that phrase came from my study of history and what I learned from Dr. John Henrik Clarke. I felt like that was the kind of thing he might have said. I noticed that at least going back to the Romans, this has been the pattern of European imperialism. They go into a place, then they get some of the locals to help them control the rest of the population, and then after a time, they kill those very same collaborators. The Romans did it, the British did it, the French did it, the Ottomans did it, the Americans do it, and we still see it today. Tools broken either by being rendered unemployed and unemployable, or otherwise being killed altogether. Other phrases that I've contributed are, the white media is not in the business of entertainment, they're in the business of mind control. There are others, but my point is that the entire reason I felt the need to formulate those expressions was because I wanted to do something to help forward this discourse that you allowed me to be a part of. I didn't say that this discourse was one that I was leading. I said that you allowed me to be part of it. The black media is you. I have said it and I will continue to say it. This is bigger than any one individual. In fact, it's bigger than any group of individuals. This is about the collective. It's been a long time since we thought like that. While a lot of you appreciate what I do, what you need to understand is that I try every day to find and refine my words to express what I know you're thinking. That's what I spend most of my time trying to do. I'm not speaking merely for myself, and it's important because I got to make sure I take out the time to find the right words, to have the right impact. And even though I feel that it's a daily effort, tomorrow I'm going to do it all over again. I'm not trying to tell you what I think. I focus my energies on trying to tell the world what you think. You know, the closest thing to a moral thought that ever went through Abraham Lincoln's empty head was when he was asked whether or not he thought that God was on the side of the Union, to which Lincoln replied, "The hope is not that God is on our side, but that we are on his." Well, you know what? I actually go for that where you guys are concerned. I hope that there's not anyone out there who's wondering whether or not all the people who listen to me or listen to other new voices of black media, whether or not you guys agree with what it is that I'm saying. My prayer is that everything that I say agrees with what you think. I don't endorse any particular religion, but I do know that we are a spiritual people. And that being the case, spirituality does have a place in our lives, even if I don't necessarily thump the Bible all the time. I speak out against drugs because our people are a sober people. We are not a people who are trying to anesthetize ourselves, or who can't handle reality so we're trying to hide behind a fog of intoxicants. Our history has shown time and again that our people do not hide from our problems, or try to dull the pain. Instead, we put an end to the pain by crushing whatever is harming us. That's what our history shows, and we don't stop until we win. Everybody else throws in the towel, looks for a way out. We look for a way through. And don't get me wrong, I've got convictions, plenty of them. But if I try to focus on my own beliefs and my own convictions alone, then what I do rises and falls right there. It becomes nothing more than a vanity project. On the other hand, when we focus on what it is that you want us to say, what it is that you're thinking, what's in your interest, then what we do becomes a calling. It becomes a mission. Because I'm doing this for something outside of myself. And if there's anything we should have learned from watching these bootlicks out here all these decades, it's that if somebody's only out here for themselves, then they've already betrayed us from day one. I caution my people against consuming white media content. You need to limit that stuff. Why? Because the enemy has tried to use its media monopoly to invent substitutes for legitimacy and to dull your senses. It tries to bestow credibility on these phonies with titles meant to fool you into thinking that they're one of us, calling them ridiculous things like new leaders of black media, etc. They're always trying to reverse engineer some sort of substitute for us. White media outlets have cherry-picked these agents and made them prominent. 500 plus years of stolen wealth allows them to do that. But they've found that none of these con men and con women have gotten any traction in the last decade. Roly-poly in that broom closet of his, The Rot, The Shade Room, The Griot, Black Pack, She the People, Shireen Mitchell, or any of these other ops. And who can forget Black News Channel? Except that most people have already forgotten about them, including apparently Byron Allen, who was rumored to be resurrecting that sunken ship. Yeah, trying to prop up these little phony sock puppet organizations, it's not as easy as it used to be. And you're the ones we can thank for that. Because white power can give these tools millions of dollars to fund their operations. It can put them on MSNBC and everywhere else. But it all becomes wasted money when the black masses reject these tools. It's all for nothing. And next thing you know, Black News Channel goes belly up. And the rest of these fools, you ain't seen them so much anymore, are you? We expose how Roly-Poly was literally getting money from Kamala Harris's campaign. Now, how is someone who's literally on the payroll of the DNC going to speak truth to power? How's a clown like that supposed to put her in check or ask her any tough questions when he's depending on her to pay his bills? The answer? He doesn't. He's out for himself, to try to become some sort of half-brained political consultant. Well, the Democrats are already listening to fools like Roly-Poly, and that's why they stay losing. As I've always said, the white media can give you a platform, But the one thing they can't give you is legitimacy. When these ops and agents call themselves insulting the black media, they don't understand they're insulting the very black masses who they're hoping to deceive. They're insulting you. I'm not the black media, at least not by myself, any more than any other person who gets behind a microphone or in front of a camera is. The black media is you. The word media is the plural form of medium. Newspapers are a medium because it's print. Radio is a medium because it's sound. Television is also a medium, but because it has so many channels, it's been called media, plural. And that becomes doubly ridiculous when you consider that most of the TV channels you see are owned by one of 4 corporations. 500 channels, all owned by the same 3 or 4 entities. I don't think anything sums up the absolute shrieking fraud of white power any better than that. That's not a media at all. But under white supremacy, you're not allowed to say that. Truth is forbidden. So that's why the black media exists, because you demanded it. You demanded that there be people out here who will tell the truth, not just the way you see it, but like it really is. That's why on my profile banner I have the phrase, telling it exactly like it is. The same way that we make it a point to recognize our heroes, our icons, our thought leaders, making it a point to do so, we don't need anyone's permission. In fact, we shouldn't be asking at all. Power doesn't ask for what it wants, it takes it. And by that same token, we're not asking anybody to validate the people who speak up for us either. We salute family like Brother Tariq, Tari and Rain, Lisa Cabrera, Chris Crazy House, Vicky Dillard, Philip Scott, Your World, any and every one of the family who have gotten out here to put their shoulder to the wheel and to do the work of standing up for and speaking up for our people. Hopefully I'm not being too pretentious or too full of myself if I say that I'm sure I speak for all of them when I say you are not the ones who have honored us. I hope and pray that we have honored you. That's why New Black Media Appreciation Month exists. We're not patting ourselves on the back. We're taking time out to say that what we do matters because we matter. Please feel free to shout yourself out in the comments. Celebrate the enemies that we've handed all these L's to, the heads that we put on the trophy wall, and the victories yet to come. Good day, and be one.